little bit more than an perfect. We're going to go a little bit more than an hour. We have Nancy McDermott, whose book came out. When did your book come out?
It came out, let's just say September 1st of last year. It was actually August 31st, but.
Okay, and that's what you should have gotten an excerpt from. If you haven't had time to read the excerpt, we'll glaze over it a little bit, but make sure to take some time to read that because it's great. And we also have, I just got it in the mail. It's shiny, it's spanky. It's Lenore Skenazy's Free Range Kids, the second edition. And Nancy got her book today too. When is it officially out yet, Lenore?
It's not out. It's out next Wednesday or Thursday, whatever the 16th is. Yeah.
Okay. So a fabulous book, and she's going to talk a little bit about, I mean, it really changed my parenting. It really changed my parenting. Even I don't know if you kept this section in on the fact that there's no recorded, like, let's kill the children with Halloween candy, but there were a lot of different ways that Halloween candy ended up becoming more sanitized, and you can talk a little bit about how crazy that was. We'll be recording the event, so if there's some part that you want to go back to, you can do that. We'll send that out. Last time we had a webinar, this time it's a meeting. And I'm really excited about that because I would love, after kind of the Nancy Lenore show, to invite you all to come on and just talk about what you're thinking and rethinking about parenting. So if you have questions, put those, since we don't have a Q&A at this point, put those in the chat. I've got a couple of polls that we'll do that I think will stimulate discussion as well. And we'll have plenty of time for interaction and to talk about what we'd really like to do with this Rethinking Parenting group. So let's start talking to Nancy and finding out a little bit more about the excerpt that she supplied for us and what she thinks about the problem with parenting with a big P. You notice it has a big P.
Okay, well, I hope you had a chance to look at the cliff notes to the book, which is kind of what the excerpt is about. It's very condensed, and I would understand if it didn't entirely make sense. But I just wanted to kind of say that when I first started writing the book, my main concern was really with parents and what parenting culture was doing to us as we were trying to raise our kids. You know, I really felt that the demands on for what parents needed to do were just ratcheting upwards and upwards and upwards. But then we would get blamed for being too involved, for doing, you know, exactly what we were supposed to be doing. And I knew it wasn't good for kids, but I think at the time, I think maybe, you know, part of it was that it was just kind of hard to see where it was going. And I just remember just falling in love with the kids that I met around me from my kids' school, their friends, my friends' kids, and just thinking, well, these kids are all right. Nothing can go wrong with these kids. These kids are you know, are going to be okay. And I was very wary of catastrophizing, which is difficult to say. But as I began to work on the book and I got further into it, my thinking really started to shift. And I would say that right now I am more concerned about how this change in our understanding of what parenthood is supposed to be, from just a state of life to a set of activities, is affecting kids. Because I think what we're doing is we're failing to pass on these kind of deeply internalized things about life and about being in the world that kids need to know. So we're in this kind of weird situation where we are having to do a kind of almost like human archaeology to figure out, what is it that we could do differently that could head off, some of the problems that kids are having. And it's not just mental health. It's this sense that I meet all these youngsters, young people who are kind of wandering around looking for their purpose. And of course, that's not really how purpose works. When you go around looking for purpose, chances are you aren't going to find it, because part of our job as parents, I think, is to kind of give our kids an entree into a common purpose with other people, to give them a sense of belonging, to give them a commitment to the future. And so I don't think we're doing that. And what we're doing instead is that, I guess you could call it maybe a sort of social engineering. So, over the pandemic, we've obsessed with our kids' resilience. And we have all of these mindfulness tools to teach our kids resilience, when really what they need is not resilience. They need hope. They need this deeply internalized emotional sense that even if it's not rational, and even if they don't have it, they don't have control, that things are going to work out. And that is what I think child rearing used to give us to some extent, which is not to say that it was perfect. And there are definitely things that were hit or miss, but I do feel like we've kind of lost something. And so what I was trying to do when I wrote this part of the book was to look at some of the things that seem to be really important, like the willingness of parents to stop trying to be kids and to really grow up and to take on that role. And I mean, you'll see if you go through it. But I think there are things that we can do that can make things better for us, but also a lot better for our kids. So I guess I'll leave it there.
Wow. I don't know how a person talks and gets seen. Oh, there I am.
You were seen.
Okay, Susan, do you want me to say something, or do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I've got plenty to say, but
You either. There's something very strange going on. People are disappearing. Oh, and it's just me. Yikes. So I really wish that I was back home in my apartment in Queens, where I had my copy of, I guess I'll look here, Nancy's book that I loved so much. It's like you can sort of read some of the words, but so much of it is underlined and like, yes, and that's what I say, or I thought so. And just now, I wish I could have underlined what you were saying, because I suddenly feel like a total lightweight, because you're so right that resilience is not the be all and end all. I keep talking about we need resilience, but hope is something bigger. And when I write about, sometimes I'll add like, independence gives kids resilience, and I'll say, and optimism. And I feel like, is that silly to suggest that? But you're making me feel like it's a great thing to give kids some optimism that they can handle things. I mean, I guess that's what resilience is, the idea that you can handle some things and that it all is worthwhile and it's all possibly even for something bigger than themselves. What I got out of Nancy being my friend and sort of parenting mentor for, I'd say, 12 years now, was her look at how I always think of, when I think of her, I think of the sandbox, because she points out that like parents sitting on the edge of the sandbox, waiting to see the interactions between their child and the other child, ready to pounce, ready to say, no, that's not right. We got to share. You have to learn now. Is that being nice? Use your indoor voice, your outdoor voice, your sandbox voice, your mommy, you're driving me crazy voice. All of this stuff was about how we are engineering our kids, because we sort of don't trust them. We don't trust anything to kick in naturally. And that's an idea that very much appealed to me. And so tonight, when I was trying to think of stories for you of the craziness in the parenting world, I went to one of my favorite sites, which is an indoor gym called Tumbles, which perhaps, I hope you're not sponsored by Tumbles, let me put it that way, because I'm going to read you a little bit about it. So at Tumbles, you can enroll your child starting at how old? 4. For what? For what, folks out there? I mean, not that I can see anyone. Is there any way to see anyone besides me?
There's no one to see yet.
Oh, there
It's
we go.
all about you, Lenore.
Okay, now at least I can cower you and not staring at myself. Okay, starting at age 4 months.
Months?
Yes, 4 months old.
Oh.
Okay, you want to? I think they're the wigglers or the spitters. I'm not sure. Shitters, whatever they are. From 4 to 8 years old, you can enroll them in a class supervised by trained adults. The toddlers and pre-toddlers start, quote, climbing up and down soft stairs. That's from the website, and crawling up inclines, according to the website. By moving this way, the baby's, quote, understanding of speech improves. Okay. And they, quote, start getting a better awareness of things around them. Now, do you think that wouldn't happen if your child is not in a class led by experts? How did you learn? Let me ask you guys, how did you learn to speak? Were you in a class for 4 months old where they hoped that you would start listening to things and getting an idea of how speech works? Is that how you learn? You guys can't talk? Oh, okay. Put your, Nancy, at least take yourself off mute because the conversation, if you can, or whoever's in the mic room.
So
Anyway,
here's a question.
Yeah.
Why do you think this proliferation, and Nancy, this is for you too, why the proliferation of experts that need to tell us how to do things? I mean, it's amazing the number of, you know, and there's Instagram, there's so many Instagram, oh, you can look at, here's what to do to increase the quality of tummy time. So why the proliferation?
I'm just going to jump in for 1 second because Nancy will have a bigger, deeper answer. But for me, it's the idea of if you're not getting ahead, you're falling behind. And so if there's, you know, of course your kid is probably going to learn how to crawl, probably going to learn how to go up inclines. There's actually a class that teaches kids, quote, how your child will learn how to push toys. Okay. But if you're not in that class, and your kid is just pushing some toys around on his own, what if he doesn't push them the best? What if he doesn't push them the fastest? What if he's not the first? And I think we've just sort of drained all the confidence out of parents, and we've drained all the trust out of children's natural development, which is what I get from Nancy talking about that. The idea that if there's a spat in the sandbox, they're gonna figure it out. And instead, we think we have to teach the kids every possible interaction to maximize it, to optimize the fun and the learning and the intensity. And then we have to keep getting more education from the experts because God knows there's somebody out there who knows how to do it better than us. And we want to learn because we don't want our kids to fall behind. That's my thought, but let's give it to Nancy.
Well, I think that a lot of it goes back to what happened in the 1970s, because in the 1970s, we had the collapse of the family as an institution, and everything was changing. I mean, it's hard even to imagine for us how much it seemed like things were changing then. People really felt like the past was no longer relevant for raising kids. And so what happens is that first you have Dr. Spock, you have baby and child care, and then you have, 3 books, and then you have 30 books, and people are going, oh my God, there are 30 books. And now we have 100,000 books just on Amazon. And in addition to that, in the early 80s, they had parenting classes at the Y, and and parents would go to that, and it wasn't. They kind of set them. These classes were set up, for sort of underserved families, but they had all these mainstream families coming because they just didn't know. They didn't know how to relate to, or how to raise their kids in these new circumstances. And I think the problem, and this is about all expert advice, is that there are some things that you have to figure them out as you go along. You have to learn on the job. And it's interesting. Somebody made, I think it was Stephanie Kuntz in one of her books, made a really interesting point about self-help literature, because self-help literature, it's like an endless market for it, because you buy it and you think, okay, now I get it, and you feel better for a while, and you have the pep talk, and and you're confident about what you're doing, but it doesn't last because somebody's telling you what to do. You haven't figured it out for yourself. And so I think it's just kind of taken on a life of its own now. And also, I think that we really denigrate parents. We denigrate parents' ability to figure this out. And, we're always second guessing parents. I think we really have to stop that. I mean, if we could stop that, that'd be half the battle.
Right.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask a question in the chat, and I would love to hear some people's answers to this. And it's going to be, in what way do you feel as a parent that you're not doing enough? In what way, as a parent, do you feel like you're not doing enough? So there's the question. Let's just take 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds.
Who's gonna win?
Who's gonna win? I love you, Lorna.
Are we quiet for the 30 seconds? Are we quiet for the?
Well, let's see. Let's see. We've got 21 people here. They came, I really tried to say some of this parenting stuff is broken. And what is the parenting stuff that's broken? And I guess I will go first.
Oh. Wait, so you typing?
I'm typing. Tick, tick.
Oh, you have enough patience. So you cheat. Oh, this makes me so sad. She or shy. I feel like you can have your career and your kids. The trick is to offload some of it to other people. Oh.
Well, I'm going to say another one.
Oh. How about you, Nancy?
Let's see. What is the thing?
There's some really good answers here. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I think, Nancy, all of this, and I'm going to be honest, I put my sense of self is too tied up in my kids' success.
Yeah. I think, depending on how we define success, I think that's everyone. I mean, it's really hard to separate your feelings from how your family is doing. And if you're, what do they say? A parent is only as happy as their least happy child. And so, of course, we want our kids to do well, and starting out with being happy, which is we're all noticing here now, we're all not that happy, but we expect our kids to be happy. It's just so hard not to, not to feel bad if your kids are feeling bad, and not to feel a little, I wouldn't say competitive, but you just don't want your kid to be floundering or lost. It's just too painful.
Yeah. Yeah. And, if we talk about the kind of helicopter generation, and as somebody that worked at Kalamazoo College said, they decided to name everybody the stealth bomber generation of parents who are so, they will call and discuss the grades of their college students with the professors. Well, excuse me, my child didn't get the grade that they expected. Could you please explain it to me? And this is, an 18, 19, 20-year-old. So, what is it that, Nancy, you and Lenore as well, what do you think is different from 50 years ago that we're now like so wrapped up in our kids' success?
Well, I mean, I think everyone should go out and get the Nora Ephron. Actually, you should just read lots of Nora Ephron. But she has this wonderful essay called Parenting in, I think, 3 stages. And she makes this really profound point, I think, is that before parenting, you had kids, and she says, and you understood that they had their own personalities, and you had your own personalities, and you kind of, you lived together, and you did grown-up things, the kid did kid things, and you get together and you read them books, and you have a little fun, you'd show them which was the salad fork, and then they would go off into the world. And I think that the thing that has happened is that we have reoriented the way that we are with our kids, so that that the point about like feeling like we don't have enough patience is a really interesting one, because I think we need to be able to have an environment where you don't have to be focused on your kid all the time, and where it's okay not to be playing with them, not to be entertaining with them. Now, I was talking to a friend of mine who was saying, she was saying that she felt really guilty because she found playing with her toddler really boring. And I found it so boring too. And it'd be like, okay, take the train. It's like, kill me now. And, and I love my kids, but, the truth is that it doesn't have to be, thank you, Jennifer, Senior, all joy and no fun. It's okay for kids to go off and do stuff on their own. We don't have to be, constantly tuning into them. And I think it's that orientation of focusing on them that is really bad, because then these things happen, and it happens to me too. It's like, your kid isn't picked for the team, or, or there's some sort of social thing. And it's like, they're happily sleeping, they're fine. And you're laying awake at night and you're thinking, oh my God, I wasn't picked for the baseball team. Oh my God, and so it's like we are, we have started to think of their lives as our jobs. And I just think that we should cut ourselves some slack, and if it feels good to be around kids, and if we're having fun, that's great, but we shouldn't feel obliged, because when it becomes a task that we're supposed to be doing, I think there's something sort of artificial about it, and it becomes kind of a burden.
Kind of a burden. Oh my God. Who invented Chutes and Ladders? Really, really. Candyland was invented, I think, for like kids who had polio and were stuck on like iron lungs, and nobody else should have to play it, because that's the only people, they're stuck there. That's all they could do. Okay, they have Candyland, but the rest of us, please, something else. So when we're talking about how boring it is to play with our kids, David Lancy, who probably Nancy is familiar with, and some others, he's an anthropologist. He's such an anthropologist. He wrote The Anthropology of Childhood. He went around the world looking at kids and parents and the difference. And the thing is that in most countries, there is a difference. And he sort of became famous for this one article he wrote in the Boston Globe. It said that you don't have to play with your kids. And he said that when he was in other countries and he would show pictures of like, a dad on the floor with his kid building Legos, or somebody playing the inevitable Candyland, or all the crafts and stuff together. Not the crafts, when it was just playing. The other people would burst out with laughing because they could not believe, like, what is he doing on the floor? But that is a grown man. It's like as if the guy had gone into the stable and started mooing. He's a grown man. What is he doing? Doing that thing that something completely else does. Children play. Grown-ups don't have to play. So first of all, it's not surprising that it's boring to play with children because it's never been done in the history of the world. Usually parents were doing something and kids would be, buzzing around and maybe trying to imitate or maybe helping out a little. That's what Micheline was talking about last time in Hunt Gather Parent. The kids would help out more, but then they would go off in a Peanuts, like Peanuts gang, and different age kids, and they would do stuff together when we weren't with them all the time. And there was this study that I refer to a lot because it explains so much. People think that this is just an upper middle class problem. All the people trying to get their kids into Harvard are starting in with the 4-month-old.
4-month-olds.
Yeah, right. With the incline class. For the decline, they never go down, do they? And so the study asked across the economic spectrum, what is the best thing to do? And over again, in the study of 2,000 or 3,000 people done by someone at Cornell, the most labor intensive, just child focused thing always won. And the one that I can remember, because I'm a certain age where I used to have freedom and now I can't remember anything, was they asked, if you're busy making dinner, but your child says that they want to draw, what should you do? Well, what do you think the answer was? Anybody answer? Nancy?
Oh, well, I imagine that parents would say, oh, I guess I got to go draw.
That's exactly it. The best thing they said the thing you should do is go draw. And to me, that's so painful because it's now you have 2 jobs, you have to make dinner and somehow you have to be drawing at the same time. And you have a kid growing up thinking that if you're not paying attention to them, something's wrong because you are always otherwise paying attention to them. And so they don't develop this sort of, independence or self-startingness or even their own interests because you're always bound together. So when the answers are, how do you, what do you feel bad about? And everybody's, I don't pay enough attention, I get bored, I'm impatient. The more time you can have your kids sort of learn to be with other kids or learn to be without you, it's sort of better for you and it's sort of better for them. Because as Nancy was talking about before, with the self-help book, somebody's always telling you what to do and it means that you're never satisfied, you never feel really good about yourself. Well, that's what we're doing with kids. This is how you do it. This is how you build with Legos. This is how you make this, drawing. And the answer is to separate a little more. Or if you're doing something together, to make it something that helps you, that isn't just for them.
Yeah, and definitely Michaeline's book, I'll grab in a second, The Hunt Gather Parent, for those of you who weren't here on the first one. I just, the idea, and there's another book that I'll put in the chat called The Continuum Concept. And it's kind of known as the attachment parenting philosophy book, but it really says, stop, here's your kid and here's the universe. That's not the way we should be thinking. It's like, here's the universe and your kid's gonna start going around in the universe. And so if you're putting together a set of IKEA bookshelves, your kid can help you with it, but you don't need to do that after they go to bed, because if you're doing it after go to the bed, they're not learning how to use, there's on the tweens group, somebody was asking for a high school graduation gift or somebody going off to college. And they said, I bought them a toolkit. I bought them a toolkit. And somebody says, I still have the toolkit that I got when I graduated high school. And it's like, give them the tools. Give them the tools instead of, the love, live, love, laugh, necklace. Give them the tools. I wanted to mention one thing, and I also want to ask, because I posted to the grandparents group, if you're a grandparent and you're here tonight, we would love to hear from you, because a friend of mine was at her father's house, and her kid, a little ball went under the couch, and she started going to reach for it, and the grandparent said, don't go get that for them. That's like a whole half an hour they can go explore underneath the couch. And it's like, that's really a good idea. And so, but from what I can tell, I mean, I feel outdated. Like, I don't know exactly what a snoo does. And my kids didn't have the little clip-on fans, which would have been really helpful 20 years ago. But grandparents, I feel like grandparents are also, they did grow kids, they raised the kids that are having kids. And do you think that we give enough credit to grandparents?
Well, I have something to say about grandparents, which is that well, first of all, it's really interesting. Okay, just to go back to the hunter-gatherers, just really quickly. One of the kind of number one thing in hunter-gatherer societies that protects against infant mortality is having a maternal grandmother. And it's because the maternal grandmother, makes this contribution to, hunting and gathering and all the rest of it. But the thing that is so tragic today is that, and I guess I'm getting into grandmother territory, even though my kids are young. But I look at babies and I've forgotten and I lust for them. But the thing about being a grandparent is that you have a little more patience. Things are kind of winding down for you. You're not at the height of your career. You're not trying to do everything. And so, whereas I don't think it's fair to expect parents to, just drop everything to draw with their kids. There are grandparents who really want to do that, who want to spend time with them and who, want to watch them. But know enough not to kind of intervene with them all the time. And instead of really valuing that, I think that we have kind of taken the cue from this whole thing in the 70s about, well, anything that's, that's past doesn't count anymore. We're making grandparents who've raised, like 3 and 4 and 5 kids, we're making them take grandparenting classes.
Wait.
Before they can stay with their grandkids.
Is that real?
It's real, yeah. I know lots of grandparents who, you can't stay with the baby until you have taken a grandparenting class. And, I mean, not that much has changed, but we have this whole sort of like perspective of like everything that they did wrong with us, and we don't want to repeat it. And so we just kind of are sometimes, not all the time, but I think that we take less, we value grandparents a little bit less than we should.
Can you tell me, what is it? I mean, like, has anybody here taken a grandparent class? I'd be very interested in what they teach.
I wonder whether, and I have this written down about how the pandemic has changed our parenting, but the idea, I mean, I'd love for people to tell any stories from the pandemic, because how many people do we know that ended up just like hightailing it to a grandparent's house, and that they ended up maybe the pandemic. I would love to hear from people any stories of how the grandparents kind of came to the rescue and did more than maybe you would have let them do if there wasn't a pandemic. Anybody want to turn on their camera and tell us a good grandparent story? Knowing that, Bueller?
They'll have to raise their hand or say something in the chat, because currently they are not allowed to turn on their video.
Oh, can we change that?
Everybody, I'd love to see everybody.
Yeah. That's I'd love to see people if we can.
Oh, Brianna hasn't seen her parents since before the pandemic.
Well, and this is another thing which is just heartbreaking, is so many grandparents I know, that the only time they get to see their kids, if they get to see them at all, is over Zoom, and it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you'd like to turn on your video, you should have that capability now.
We want to see you, so turn it on. Right?
Even if you don't want to be seen, we see you.
If you are afraid of your mess, I will tilt my camera and you will see everything that I shoved to the side.
Or why I have this really cool background that I have pretty much all the time.
This will fall off. Trust me, there's a giant.
And we keep all the trash with our feet.
Yes. So, oh, My polling session is inactive. Oh, can you start a poll, Sean? I think since we're both logged in, you are logged in from another device, your polling session is inactive.
What were you going to?
I think I can launch it. One moment.
Okay,
Would
I'd
you
love
like
to know, let's do the first one.
All right.
Oh, yay, I saw this.
Oh, that's so
Hey,
cool.
hi, Nicole.
Oh, we can't hear you. You're still muted.
There
Hi
you go.
guys. I
Hi.
went running and I haven't washed my hair, so I look very fabulous.
Okay, that's okay. That is okay. Well, I think we're going to try to start a poll here, but you know, I do think I remember my mother-in-law going back to the playing. My mother-in-law loved Groovy Girls and Barbies, and they're both home. I just can't play with Barbies on the floor for all this time. And so Nana came to the rescue. My mother-in-law would sit on the floor for hours and, oh, let's put this on them. And so maybe being a grandmother gives you a chance to go back and be a kid again.
You don't have a deadline or something like that, or you don't have to, get out the door by 7:25. Sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
just wanted to say we ended up, someone said they hadn't seen their dad since their parents since the pandemic. We decided to stay with my dad, who was also living in Brooklyn during the pandemic, because I was afraid, we didn't know how long it was going to be. And I said, if we don't stay with him, who knows how long we might not see him. And we see him usually twice a week. So I said, it's just going to be, I don't think my 4-year-old will understand not being able to see him for months and months on end. So we ended up living with him for 2.5 months, which was of course crazy and wild. And I had a newborn and at the time, and so it was even more wild. And I'd go to like nurse the newborn, and then they'd be doing something that was like, oh, we're having we're watching a little TV, or we're doing this. But my dad, just like you're saying, your parents, Susan, can play on the floor with my son. They build all sorts of things out of the couch pillows. Every single day they had a new creation with the couch pillows. It was a spaceship one day and a train another day. And, they're going to the African plains and the jungle and this and that. And so it was just, and they still do that every time he goes over, among many other things. So it's just fabulous, because it's like, it's different than our house. It's a new place, a different type of space. And there's just like there is that sort of willingness. And I don't have my mom, but I feel very lucky that my dad is willing to play and just be really involved in that grandparenting and wanting to be there for that.
And, I guess one of the questions about that is, what are the things that, we can turn it on its head. What are the things that your grandparents do that you don't want them to do? Because that's the other thing. Why do you make them go to grandparent classes? Because things have changed, Mom, since you were a mom, and you need to, and Nancy, in the excerpt that we read, you said the only thing that's really changed in parenting is they sleep on their tummies instead of on their backs.
They sleep on their backs instead of.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that'll change in a little bit. That'll change soon.
Never survive.
It's been 17 years.
I know.
So let's think back, and we're going to switch to you, Lenore, and to talk about your cool second edition, to tell us, what has changed. I'm going to put this question in the chat. What is something that you were allowed to do that you don't let or won't let, if your kids are too small, your own kids do? So what is something that you are allowed to do that you don't let your own kids do? So let's just take a second, put it in the chat.
I can't wait to see. So type away.
Oh, the poll was launched. Oh, and I don't get to see the poll because I'm a host.
Page 11. Wow. There was a Connecticut,
Holy cow.
yeah, a Connecticut case where a mom got I don't know, a ticket or a citation for letting her 11-year-old wait in the car while she went in and ran an errand. Because 11-year-olds. And here's a kid who was babysitting at 10. All right, let's hear a 9.
My mother tells the story of babysitting 3 kids at 10 and making them dinner.
Yeah, I've heard of young kids back then, like 11 or whatever, who did the night shift. Like the nurse next door was on a night shift, so they babysat, put the kids to bed, and I guess slept over. I mean, and of course, that's not unusual in terms of what kids are allowed to do around the world, but we really have sort of undermined what we think kids are capable of. And then if you don't let kids do anything, then they become less capable. I'll just tell you my shocking story. Eat candy and chocolate and watch my entire childhood. Yes, yes, eat sweets every day. And I would say breakfast, lunch, dinner, and bedtime snack were generally sweets. And not to forget the time after school when you were watching TV and eating chocolate covered peanuts. So if my sister's
Gilligan's Island.
same, my kid's a toddler, spending the night at other people's homes. Yeah, I don't think anybody let their toddler spend the night at someone else's home. Circus peanuts, yes. So what interests me, that there's a bunch of things that have changed, and it's been about 12 years since free range kids came out the first time. And I was just trying to think about what had changed for the better and for the worse. And one of the biggest changes, I think, is cell phones. And it's not just that we all have cell phones and that we give the kids a phone when they're whiny or bored. It's that there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was literally called "How to Raise a Free Range Kid in 2020," and they didn't call me. Okay, fine. And what they said, the answer was to give all the children a smartwatch. Because if they're too young for an actual phone, you could put this little watch on them. I guess probably a lot of you out there have done this or have had these. Anyways, it allows you to be in touch with the kid and also see where they're going, geolocate them. And that sort of is less upsetting to me in a way than the fact that it also allows the kid to be in constant touch with the parent. And the example they gave of how this was allowing parents to feel relaxed and free because it allowed their children to free range was this mom who said that when she was a kid, what she absolutely loved doing was going down by the creek and being by herself and, looking at the stones and, splashing around, whatever she did. She said it was really important time for her because it's alone time. It was independence. It was time for her to think and sort of become herself. And she really, really wanted that for her own daughter. And now that her daughter was that same age, she gave the kid a smartwatch. I can't remember, she was 8 or 9. And hallelujah, the other day when the kid was riding her bike and the chain fell off the bike, the daughter could immediately call, "Dad, my chain fell off my bike." And he was lickety split at her side, fixing the bike. And this was considered a triumph for independence. And am I like the only cranky old lady now who thinks that that's not independence and that it has taken away so much of what childhood was and what was both magical because you were sort of off the grid and you were by yourself and you were figuring things out, and also you talk about not just resilience but feeling competent and becoming part of the world is when you figure something out. The chain fell off. Can I fix it? You work to fix it. Oh, you can't fix it. Can I get home without the chain? Look, I can. That's very different from having an adult always available to come and rescue, help, entertain, assist you. And I this is just me thinking about these things, and I haven't spoken with other people about them yet. So I would love to hear other people's thoughts about what does it mean when parents and children are sort of separate, but not really, because they are able to always, summon each other should they need that. And a parent always knows where a kid is. I mean, I would love to hear anybody else's thoughts. But perhaps I won't. How about you, Nance?
I used to be alone a lot, and I did, the chain came off the bike. I got locked out of the movie theater. I was far from home. I remembered the way home. I walked home. My parents were searching everywhere. I was sleeping on the couch. Um, and the thing that I find frustrating, I guess, is that my kids are just a lot less adventurous than I was. And I mean, I wasn't even being adventurous, but there's just this kind of like expectation that we have set. And it's not just what you do in your family, it's what everyone does. You know, that someone must come in and give you the solution. And so yeah, so I find that really frustrating. So for example, I had this idea that I wouldn't get the kids' phones until like the very last minute. But then the school was like organizing everything around having phones, you know, and so my kid is like the last kid waiting to be picked up because practice ended early. And I get there and the coach is there like, it's the kid waiting for the bad mother, you know, and the kid couldn't call because the kid didn't have a phone, you know, and I just I think we have I think that the technology has just amplified all of this and made it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things that you said before was so interesting to me too, and sort of in the bike chain venue, which is that the kid lost the ball underneath the couch, and then the parent going to get it was chastised because if the kid has to look for the ball, it will take half an hour. That's sort of what childhood was. It was not optimized. You know, there wasn't somebody making sure that like the game began on time and that the kids were at this activity and then that activity. And when it is optimized that way, we have to fill in all the blanks because empty time starts seeming like wrong. I mean, you know, time to just kick around or time when you're figuring out what to do with your friends as opposed to an adult saying, this is the chess game or now we're starting the ball game. You don't have any downtime to figure out what you actually want to do or how to make it happen because there's somebody else teaching you, you know, this is how to roll, this is how to walk up an incline, now we're going to start the game. And what does that mean if we don't give kids some time to figure out what they want to do and how to do it, because we're showing them what they should do and how to do it, and we're making it happen for them. These are things that worry me, and I worry that I'm so out of it that what I'm talking about is almost irrelevant to today's families because they are going off to the organized activities and everybody does have a phone. So I wonder if I sound like I'm, you know, drifting off on an ice floe somewhere. Tell me. And I wish everybody would take themselves off mute.
Yeah, we're going to put you on an ice flow.
Yeah.
We're all going on an ice flow. And I think one of the things, you know, and as I said at the beginning of this, there's so much here. There's history. And Lily and Angelina, I don't want to I feel like your large comment should be a whole discussion in and of itself. I feel like we should be spending a whole hour on that. And I hope we have 5, 6, 7, 15, 20 of these kinds of conversations. And so, you know, Nicole's asking this idea of the world has changed so much. And I would love to get somebody who, and maybe there's somebody on here that can pop in, is the consumer side of all of this. And the fact that, you know, if I can sell a book that tells you damn shouldn't let your kid cry it out, then great. I have a PhD, I can write that book. And then the other person is saying, oh, if you don't let your kid cry it out, they're not going to sleep enough and their brains are going to be mush. So you better let them cry it out. And so we have, even competing in these 100,000 parenting books, I feel like all of these different things are so motivated by let's sell I didn't have a baby monitor that had a camera. I feel really old, but my baby monitor didn't have a camera. And now they have a camera and they record and they can test the the heat that the baby's feeling. And maybe, I don't know, somebody in the chat can tell me what other cool, and it's, you can kind of geek out on the technology. It's really, really cool. But is it overboard? Is it too much?
I'm going to geek out for 1 second. So the other things it can tell you are your baby's blood oxygen, their pulse, and their movement level. And the reason it disturbs me is because obviously everything disturbs me, but in particular, we're taking technology that was developed for children who were very seriously ill. These were developments from the neonatal intensive care unit, and we're selling them to parents as if every parent needs this. Just like that class I was talking about at the beginning, where it's a movement class. Early intervention is great if your child has some developmental problems, but we're acting as if every child is in serious physical danger, serious danger of not developing mentally, and then the stuff that Nancy talks about, they're not going to develop socially unless we're watching every movement and commenting on every shovel stealing episode. And it really means that, first of all, we have to spend a ton of time and money observing everything they do and trying to tweak it. But it also means that we are thinking of our children only from a deficit level. We're not thinking of them being capable, competent, resilient, quirky, curious, or kind. We're thinking of them as being automatically mean, stupid, slow, left behind, possibly fat or cruel, and we better get in there right away or something terrible is going to happen. So it means that your entire life is spent trying to keep disaster from happening, most of which wasn't going to happen. And it takes every second of a parent's life, especially a mom, if they're going to worry about this. And if you're starting by looking at your monitor every second, did he breathe? Did he breathe? Did he breathe? That's an extremely demanding life for a mom, and it's the life of a neonatal intensive care child superimposed on a thriving, healthy baby. It seems like a real waste of health and luck to treat all children as if they are seriously fragile.
I dropped mine. Actually, she fell off the bed. She actually survived. She kind of bounced. Going back to Lily and Angelina's, I teach a class at NYU. I have a PhD in interpersonal communication. I teach a class in interpersonal communication, and we talk about family communication. And there's an article I have my students read, and that article says, everybody wants to think about the past as nostalgic and as the golden age, but it's not. And so to speaking, and Lily and Angelina, we would love to have you come on, and definitely this idea that, there were bad things that happened in my family that got overlooked, and there was bad things that happened in a lot of people's families. I think a lot of those things are still happening. And when a good parent is overly concerned about those, I was really glad to see, when my kids were, like 10 and 7, there were a lot of things about internet safety. I think with Parksville Parents even had something about internet safety. And so, how can we keep our kids from like the deep dark web and getting kidnapped and those kinds of things? And I've actually seen, and maybe Lenore, you can speak to this, I've seen a lot of that kind of not as prevalent as it used to be, because there are more things that I can, on Instagram, it's not just some weird chat group anymore. It's like Instagram, and I have to allow you to follow me, and I have to, I can choose who I follow. And so seems like there's a little more control with social media, which is a whole nother thing. But, what do you guys think in terms of, of the golden era? And so it's not a golden era, it's not the golden age, but what are the things that we're losing now that you think we could use to come back?
For me, it always boils down to some unstructured and unsupervised time. The question we didn't ask, I think, was what did you love doing that you
Oh,
don't
yes.
let kids do? Not just what you were allowed to do, like eat the candy or whatever. And a lot of people, when asked that question, will talk about freedom, and freedom is not always perfect, right? I mean, bad things happen. You have to figure out what to do. I would always encourage kids to have very free communication with their parents if something is bothering them or horrible. I wouldn't say that we want to go to a silent stoic age, but being on your own is irreplaceable. And childhood, it's not just the golden age of childhood, it's the history of childhood has always had some unsupervised time away from the adults. And if you don't have that, and you don't have that chance to fix your bike or to make up your own game or to solve your own argument with your friend because somebody's there, mediating for you. Peter Gray, who's one of the co-founders with me of Let Grow, puts it this way. He says that, other animals come out and like in an hour, they can do whatever they have to do for the rest of their lives. They're gazelle, they can walk and they can eat, and run. So they're set. But humans come out and we are so uncooked that the only thing the brain has going for it is curiosity. And it is waiting for words that it will hear and inclines that it will climb up and frustration and fear and difficulty and joy and connecting and surprises. And if we take a lot of those out because we're afraid that our kids can't handle them or because we're always there smoothing things out, there's wires that just don't get connected. It's like weaving one way but not the other way, and it's just not as strong a net for children as they grow up as if they had some opportunity to deal with some things good and bad, not horrible, not bullying, not sexual abuse, just a spat or being left out or losing a game. You just have to give some independence and I would say improv back to kids, because having everything structured and supervised is a weird and sort of debilitating thing to do. And that's why I'm dedicating my life to just trying to make it easier and more normal and obviously legal to give kids back that time when we're not always with them. So it's not a golden era. It's sort of the human race used to have free time in childhood, and it is disappearing like the rainforest. We're living through it, and we're not recognizing that this is a natural resource that we shouldn't just let disappear.
Well, the other thing that I think about sometimes that relates to that is that, it's really true that, animals by and large are kind of born with all of the instincts that they need to survive. But what we have instead of instincts is we have culture. So we have taken all of that stuff that are internal within animals, and we have created this externalized culture that belongs to all of us. And our kids are like little culture learning machines. And that's why, they're always watching and picking up and trying to figure out where they fit into that. And I think that they need to be able to do that. So it's not, I loved going to the creek by myself and stuff, but it's also about, talking to the lady next door, or being out, where there are other people, and watching and observing, even if you don't even know that you're doing it, and picking up on that stuff, because I think that when we try and kind of curate everything, it's just not quite the same. And sometimes, like for example, there's a very interesting study that is cited in Alison Gopnik's book, The Gardener and the Carpenter, which is a wonderful book. But she talks about how they discovered in looking at the way that kids learn about social categories, and if they think that they're flexible or not, they discovered that when we would, have our, our nursery rhyme books, and there would be like the firemen, and we'd say, and girls can be firemen too. What it actually did was it actually reinforced the idea that girls couldn't be firemen. I mean, it was insane, but it had to do with the way that it was being posed. And so, when we try and socially engineer these things and try and, kind of stage manage how our kids learn and what they learn, sometimes it doesn't always end up, sometimes we end up doing precisely the opposite of what we set out to do. I mean, they have the ability, our kids have the ability to learn this stuff. We just gotta step back and let them do it.
Yeah, to that end, when I studied intergenerational communication and interability communication, and this idea that when you see an article that says 80-year-old man jumps out of a plane, and because you've seen that, it really reinforces that 80-year-olds shouldn't be doing this because this is newsworthy. And because this is newsworthy, it ends up being reinforcing to a negative stereotype about the elderly. And a lot of the intergenerational these programs that they set up where they'd have a class go and hang out with people from a nursing home, and it's supposed to make people feel less anxious and more positive about growing older and things like that, is that what it ended up doing is if you didn't generalize to all old people, you still had your negative attitude toward old people, but that old guy, Uncle Louie, that I saw at the nursing home, he was cool. Yeah. So again, just reinforcing that idea that sometimes when we over engineer, we can't, and that's not saying that we shouldn't be doing other things that are showing that girls can be pilots and this and this and this and astronauts and all of those kinds of things. But when we make such a big deal about it, sometimes it can limit us and say, oh, that's great, but that's so unusual. And so I worry about the attitudinal side of that. I put that book, The Gardener and the Carpenter, in the chat. I'd really, because I don't want to take people, we're going to go for maybe five or 10 more minutes if you can stick around. But in the last day, and I promise, it wasn't a plant, but somebody on Park Slope Parents asked the question, I'm seeking wisdom on how to deal with aggression at the playground when your child is too little to fend for themselves. My son is 1.5 years old. He was drawn to a feature on the playground last weekend, the hand set of drums. When a bigger kid, probably around 4, spotted him playing with it, he ran over, pushed my son out of the way, and blocked him from playing the drums. I interceded and asked the boy not to push and said something about sharing the equipment. He took off with his friends, but then when my tot reapproached the area, the boy came back again, blocked him from using it. It didn't seem like the boy had supervision. I was at a loss. I was angry that he was physically intimidating my little guy, and I wanted to stand up for him. Totally get that. But I also didn't want to overstep with someone else's kid. And I know the prevailing guidance is to let kids manage their own playground altercations, but what do you do when your child is too young to stick up for themselves? And, I just thought that's like, we can talk about, oh, we should let kids play and this and this and this, but then when you see these things happen, that's kind of the rubber to the road. And I can't believe that somebody 60 years ago would be okay with that behavior either.
Yeah, I don't think they would. But also, when I talk about like let kids play, I'm never talking about a 1.5-year-old being by themselves, fending off the giants who are 4 and 5 years old. So, I mean, that's a situation where any 1.5-year-old is going to have to be supervised. I say this, I'm the unsupervising lady, and I say 1.5 years, you need constant supervision, I would say, and certainly outside around other kids. So I don't think she has much choice but to intervene.
Yeah. And, Michael Lean's Hunt, Gather, Parent book there's an email from February 14th, Valentine's Day. And I had taken a picture of a section of Michaeline's book, Hunt, Gather, Parent. And it said, and because it's a book that lays out like, here's what they do in other cultures, and here's how we've kind of warped our sense of parenting. But she says this: change how you view children's behavior. Expect young children to misbehave and cause problems. They aren't pushing your buttons or trying to manipulate you. They're simply irrational beings who haven't learned proper behavior yet. You have to teach them. And I bet Nancy would say, we have to teach them. And their misbehavior doesn't mean you're a bad parent. And there is definitely, and I think we should have another whole discussion about parent shaming.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, and the fact that if my kid's being a jerk and throwing a horrible temper tantrum, then I feel like it's a reflection on me. And where did that come from? Where, when did the compassion, where did the kind of like, sounds like a tough day for you kind of thing, where did that go? Do you have an idea, Nancy?
Well, I mean, I think that there. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back. I'm going to talk about when their family was an institution, which I'm not trying to say that we should go back to the past, but I do think that there is something valuable about having an institution that other people recognize and grow up in, because when you're part of something that is more than this sum of its parts, it's not just about you and your parent, it's about you and your siblings and all the other people in this family. And I think that experience I had an impact on the way that people related to kids. And so, when I was growing up, even if an adult didn't particularly like kids, they felt a certain obligation that, okay, I can't let them go through the frozen pond or whatever it was. And I think that one of the reasons why things have become so hard is that we really have lost that sense of being this being a generational project, not just a thing that individual parents do with individual kids, but something that everybody has an interest in and plays a part in. And I mean, I remember at one point in Park Slope Parents, we had this discussion about what is the unwritten rule of the playground. And we went back and forth. And my opinion of what the unwritten rule of the playground is that we have to back up the other grown-ups and help them to take care of the kids in the playground. So if that means that, someone is, holding somebody else's toddler's head underwater, you got to intervene. And it's awkward and people will get defensive, but we've just got to learn to accept the help and to give the help in a way that, is not in a shaming way. I mean, sometimes I think people don't mean to be shaming, although sometimes they do, and I hate when they do that. But I think that, we just need to learn to be nice, and we need to learn not to be defensive, and to work together to stop the Lord of the Flies.
Emily, do I need to ask you to unmute? I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, I was the one who sent that post in about the playground situation, and I got a ton of responses on Park Slope Parents, a lot of direct responses, and I think that most of them, people were saying, I would intercede, and if it was my child doing that, I would want someone else to intercede. So it felt like the majority of the people felt, I felt like there was support in understanding that all of our kids can misbehave from time to time, and that it's okay. Like, we need to help each other out with that. There were a couple of people who I felt like had these kind of next level responses, which was kind of what I was looking for, in more kind of empathetic and kind ways to intercede that aren't just like, hey, don't hit my kid. And then there were a few people who responded and were really kind of, I think, sensitive to some of the words that I used. One being bullying. I was just trying to think of a way to describe the situation really, really succinctly in the subject line. And I said he was bullied at the playground. I didn't mean that the 4-year-old was a bully. And I had some back and forth with someone, and I just said, I was just trying to, convey that this little boy was being aggressive. And then, she was even saying like, well, don't use the word aggressive because it's normal behavior. I'm like, well, but it's still aggression, right? It's normal. I'm not saying it's abnormal or that this child is bad or anything, but
Emily, what was the great advice?
If I can repeat it half as well as there was one guy in particular who I think he said he had been on the last session, one of these sessions.
Chris, I think.
Yeah, Chris.
Christopher.
And he said that, when things like that happen with his kids, he tries to, in a friendly way, engage the, aggressor and say, hey, what's your name? Do you want to play drums with us? And just engage them more socially. And so you're, kind of modeling for your child how to interact socially, but also just opening up a dialogue with that child. And that's really what I was hoping for, because I couldn't figure that out on my own. But what my parents did was I'm going to take on the role of disciplinarian at the park, or my dad went on my field trip and was like disciplining kids in my class, which was super embarrassing. But that's all that's what was modeled for me. And that was my instinct, was to be like, hey, don't push my kid. He can play with those drums. But I kind of felt like, and that's fine, but I'd really love to learn a way that's teaching my child something and that's opening up a more friendly conversation with this other kid, if that's possible. So I was really grateful. I thought Chris's advice was really great. And there were some other people too who had some thoughts about, just things you could say to your child so that you're encouraging them or teaching them to use their own voice. I don't feel like I'm articulating that very well, but it was good. And it was just great also to get a read generally on where the population is. But I think that most people were supportive of needing to step in those situations.
I mean, one of the difficult things is like developmentally what kids can do. I mean, a couple of things I've learned, because I had a similar situation with my little boy at the park, and there were these two older kids, and they were horrible. And in the dark night of my soul, I thought they were, I thought you're psychopaths, these little psychopaths at the 3rd Street playground. I thought really evil things about these kids, and chase them off and stuff. And then I encountered them like in 2 years, and they were lovely. And I think what had happened is that I think that when they're that young, they don't really understand. And I'm not sure that to what extent they can understand that you have to treat little kids differently, especially if they don't have any siblings. And I think that might be, I don't know if they still do this, but when my kids were in pre-K, they all had these little bears from IKEA. My son Collins was named Paul, and then the other one had another name, and they take care of the bears and they learn to be gentle with the bears. And so that's making me think that, maybe this is something that, is just maybe you do just have to tell them to stop it, because they may be too young to get it. So yeah. And then the other thing I was going to say is that, there are these experiences that my, I remember from my kids' childhood that left this indelible mark on me. And I, they're in high school now, and I say, remember that time at the park when the boy hit you with the stick and mommy had to, and my son's like, what are you talking about? They don't remember. You think it's this big thing, and then damn it, they don't remember.
They
So
don't remember,
it's
that's
probably a good thing they don't remember, but
a lot of things. You never know what's going on in someone else's mind, but not every little thing is a lesson or a wound. A lot of it just goes by. We might
Yeah.
remember, we might not.
I know that with Samantha, my first, who's now 19, whenever she fell, I was like, are you okay? And I did that so often that she just thought every time she fell, there was going to be something wrong. And this book, The Continuum Concept, is really interesting. Don't touch that, you're going to get burned. Don't, like we program our kids to feel this way. So I'd like to wrap up, but one of the things that I would like to do is start a group. I wish it was the whole group. And maybe that's where the conversation really does need, all of these little, we've got the attached parents and the mindful parents and the rethinking parenting people all in these little cubbies. But I feel like we need a space to say, hey, and Lenore, if we can put together another Let Grow session. Has it been 2 years, 3 years that we did that? We went out to the park by the Zucker Natural Play Yard. And the kids played by themselves and we sat around and talked. Maybe we'll bring wine this time. But all different age kids, because little kids love to be around bigger kids, and big kids learn a lot about how to teach, and they feel a sense of like, oh, I helped this little kid learn how to swing a bat, So I would love to do that and to have more age integration and those kinds of things. So if there's anything else that you think would be part of this new group that really kind of gets their hands dirty in, how to raise kids in a way that doesn't drive us crazy. Because I have to say, from 2001, 3 days after 9/11, when my first child was born, to now, I'm not seeing parents who are any calmer. If anything, it's a lot more stressed. And how do we as Park Slope parents, how do we as a society kind of back ourselves up and cut ourselves a hell of a lot more slack?
Yeah. I think
So if you want to comment or come on, let us know, raise your hand. And, has this been helpful to talk this way? Is it helpful? Although most of you didn't take, I was on a Zoom last night and nobody took their cameras off of, nobody turned their cameras on. I think we're all just really tired of Zoom, which is why the next interaction should be at Zucker Playground or Zucker Exploration Area. Definitely helpful, says Nicole. Thank you.
fun to meet you guys.
yay! Hi, Emily.
Hi, Emily.
I'll
Thank
just
you
say
so much.
It's also hard to get on Zoom after at 9 o'clock.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming, everybody.
Yeah. It's so nice to, I just want to see people.
Should never have left Park Slope. That's part of it.
Well, I have a pet deer.
Can I say one thing too?
Nicole, yes?
You had said. So I think one of the things that, as we all know, stresses us out so much is that there's just, other than the parenting stuff, other than the fact that we don't have the proximity often to grandparents and family members, and there's not that circle of care that the that's sort of more natural in other parts of the world. the, just being, when we want to relax, or when we say, oh, we have 10 minutes to ourselves, what do? We hop onto Instagram, Facebook, whatever. And that's not really relaxing at all. And so you do that and you think like, oh, I have a few minutes to myself. I'm just going to like sit and whatever. And I think part of the problem is that when we do have like the little downtime we have is zapped up by these other things that are not really parenting related, but they're just like these, the energy zaps of all this social media, and also just being on call constantly on email or whatever else. Like I don't work, so that's great. So I barely check my email, and and then and someone's like, did you get my email that I sent? So anyway, but most people do, and they're on top of everything. And I don't know how, and it's just amazing that people do it. But it's like, I think it's such a zap. And I wonder if if Park Slope parents if there are any sort of people who can help parents think through that a little bit too. Just, I mean, and there's a lot of like time things and organization things, but like, how do we think through that a little bit better for ourselves? Because it's like, we're just being zapped constantly.
No, one thing we started doing, which of course fell apart in the pandemic, but it was good for a while, is we just stopped. We had one day a week where nobody was on their phones or the computer, and they were so angry at us. But then then it actually got to be a good thing. It's like, oh, he's reading a book, or or we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was only one day, but it did make a difference.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from Preet and Brianna, because you guys you've taken off your camera, you've turned on your cameras. Talk to us.
Hi, can you hear us?
Hear us. You're good.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this conversation we had about the child in the playground, and I was reflecting on myself, and like, I think it might be partly because I'm a child of immigrants, but I feel like my generation was a generation of like overachievers, where we've always been taught you can be the best at anything you try and do. Like, just try it and you'll be the best if you work hard enough. So this conversation about parenting in the playground, like, I'm really interested in like what's the best way to respond to that situation, but at the same time I'm like, do I really need to think deeply about that particular interaction? So it's kind of like the over parenting versus the trying to be the best parent that you could possibly be in. It's hard to differentiate those two things.
Well, it's interesting because we've had there's a webinar we have had multiple times called The Talk, and it's about talking to your kids about sex, and the idea is, and there's a great book called From Diapers to Dating, and it really goes through the idea that not only is it not one conversation about the birds and the bees, it's an ongoing conversation, and sometimes you really screw it up, and you're like, oh, I said too much about my first date or my first boy. And then you have another time to do it again. And so this idea that one individual interaction is going to somehow scar your kid. My daughter was taking horseback riding lessons, and the woman who taught her was kind of mean. She kind of yelled at Samantha, and I thought, I don't want my daughter getting taught. I'm paying somebody to yell at my daughter. And then I kind of thought about it. I might have even talked to you about it, Nancy. And she's going to run into mean people. And she was a good instructor on how to ride a horse. She just had a different style than mine. And so I kept up the lessons, and I'm really glad I did, because meeting all of these different people, and Emily, having your son go through this was one little piece of evidence to say, Mom sticks up for me, which is a good thing to know. And depending on how you said you're not allowed to do that, then it's not just me that's getting told no, says the 1.5-year-old, but it's other people too. And if it's older kids, then maybe even that will be reinforcing, hey, it's not okay to hit. But I want to turn to Brianna. No pressure.
I'm not sure what to say, but I found the call tonight very helpful. I was on the part 1, and after that call, I got Michaeline's book and read it and absolutely loved it. And I'm going to read it a second time so that I can take it in a little bit more.
After you read the Free Range Kids book.
Yes, yes. And Lenore, I love your humor. Very, very nice to interject that into these conversations. So just big thank you to everybody. I find it very helpful and looking forward to some in-person interactions and being able to work through a lot of these things, you know, together as a community.
Excellent. And Lenore has to leave at 9:30, and it's we've already gone over way over time. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Lenore. Thank you, Nancy. Let's do this in the playground. You guys need to come back. Nancy, you need to come down.
Yeah, I do. I would love to. And somebody saved the chat. I thought this chat was really interesting. And I've never
saving chat.
Saved my chat. So
chat is changed. And thank you for all the people who showed up. Hi, and we got Brianna and Brianna. And we'll do this again. Are you ready to have your baby, Brianna? The other one. Hang on. There you go.
So ready. This is my third. I don't have any of the jitters. I just want to get it over with. Like,
well, excellent. You guys,
great.
Thanks so much for
Yeah,
coming. I love talking about this kind of stuff. And let us know what works, what doesn't work. I really want to go back and reread what Lily and Angelina said, and maybe even have a whole talk on that. So I think they're gone. But bye.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Goodbye. Goodbye.